Hi, I'm Liz Murphy with PECO, and we are thrilled to be sponsoring Go Forth and Learn. It's part of the Wawa Welcome America Festival. At PECO, we know that learning never stops, so we put our energy into learning and exploring with you all week long in the comfort and safety of your home. Please enjoy, and thank you.
Good morning, America. Happy Independence Day, and welcome to the birthplace of the United States, Independence Hall, the former State House of Pennsylvania. We are now standing in the actual room where during the summer of 1776, that delegates representing 13 colonies formed a Congress, the First Continental Congress, and they met here to debate their growing differences with the King and the British Parliament. By June of 1776, Richard Henry Lee, from the famous Lee family of Virginia, proposed a resolution. Resolved that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connections between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. With that resolution, the Congress decided to create a committee, and they would charge this committee with producing a suitable document which could explain to the entire world the reasons behind the revolution. Folks, you guessed it, that document was called the Declaration of Independence. Now, some of the men who served on this committee are not very well known. Delegates such as Roger Sherman, who was a distinguished patriot from Connecticut. You have Robert Livingston, who was a delegate from New York. And John Adams, who was a well-known lawyer from the Boston area. We also wanted to add to this list a very popular scientist and printer, Benjamin Franklin. And finally, according to John Adams, in order for this whole process to work, a Virginian should also appear at the head of the business. And who was that Virginian? You guessed it, Thomas Jefferson. Folks, as a young man, 33 years of age, Jefferson had displayed a great talent at penmanship, and in just 2 weeks' time, he produced a document which he referred to as an expression of the American mind. And in the Declaration, he provided over 27 charges against the King. Now, among those complaints, we also realize that Jefferson used this opportunity to also raise some very powerful ideas about human rights and freedom. One of the most memorable lines was the notion that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Along with those memorable lines, Jefferson also wrote something that was extremely radical in the Declaration. And the radical idea that he included was the notion that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Because what Jefferson was trying to tell people is that no longer do we have to be ruled by divine right of kings, that the people indeed had the capacity and the ability to govern themselves. Truly radical idea that was espoused in this document. Now, folks, consider it along these lines. Writing the Declaration of Independence was Thomas Jefferson's homework, and although he completed his homework, when he presented it to his colleagues, each man picked up his quill, and with their quills, they read his document like a fine-tooth comb, word for word and line by line. Before they were finished, over 80 changes were made to the document. Maybe the most consequential change was a clause in which Jefferson attacked the African slave trade. And in the Declaration, he essentially accused the King of imposing slavery on the colonies. 2 colonies in particular, Georgia and South Carolina, threatened not to vote for independence unless that clause was removed from the draft. But after those changes were made, the Declaration was formally adopted here in this room. Now, on July the 1st, the resolution was called for a debate, and it was called for a vote. And on July the 1st, only 9 colonies voted in favor of independence. So that evening, word was sent out to Delaware to alert a delegate whose name was Caesar Rodney. And he was a well-known patriot, and he was urged to get on his horse and leave the sickbed and travel 80 miles from Dover to Philadelphia. Historians are still not clear how he was able to do this, but he was actually able to arrive here in time for the following morning to help cast the vote in favor. So by July the 2nd, 12 out of 13 states had voted for independence, therefore achieving the birth of the United States. Later that day, John Adams wrote to his diary that from this day forth, Americans will observe July the 2nd with bonfires, shows, and illuminations. What's wrong with the picture, folks? Even though July the 2nd should be the true Independence Day. But after the next 2 days, they made changes to the Declaration, and on July the 4th, the Declaration was formally adopted. And the actual signing of the Declaration occurred a month later on August the 2nd. Now, folks, after declaring independence, the rest was yet to come. Declaring independence was one thing, but ultimately we had to fight a war to achieve our freedom. That struggle was destined to last for a total of 8 years. France and Spain will join in the cause of American independence. Native Americans will also join and fight for independence. Women and enslaved Africans will also fight for the cause. And during the darkest period, the city would be occupied by the British Army. And for 9 months, the British occupied Independence Hall. They used the second floor as a prison where they detained captured American soldiers. Now, folks, with the idea of all men are created equal, with that promissory comment, throughout history, the Declaration will inspire people, not only in this country, but around the world. And Abraham Lincoln, he made the Declaration famous in his Gettysburg Address, in which he wrote, 77 years ago, our fathers put forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Much later in history, Frederick Douglass will use the Declaration to argue for civil rights. Dr. King will also refer to the Declaration as a promissory note, and to this day, this document continues to reverberate not only around these walls, but around the world for the eternal struggle for freedom and self-government. So folks, I ask you today, as we celebrate this rather unprecedented time with the coronavirus, that as we ourselves are being asked to make sacrifices during this difficult time, let's take a few minutes of your day to think about the sacrifices that our forebears also made to achieve our independence and to create what I believe to be the greatest nation on the face of the earth. Happy Independence Day, America.